Picture this scenario. You have a female psychiatry patient. She presents with a history of anxiety attacks, but she's been on medication for many years now. And she elaborates how this has changed as she now feels better. She feels controlled. Well, her condition feels controlled to her. She's smiling. She's engaging. She's happy that her life has been changed. But you take a quick mental state examination of the patient. You realize there's some subtle hints of abnormalities. You don't know what it is, but you just pick it up. For example, between questions, she stares away, becomes distracted, blinks many times, nods a lot when answering the question. Something that is abnormal but very subtle that you pick up. Or picture this patient. A 70-year-old female who one morning woke up with some tingling sensation in her hand, some numbness. She takes no notice of it. She thinks it'll go away in a few hours. Maybe she slept wrong, maybe she slept on her hand. The tingling sensation stays for the day, doesn't increase, doesn't go away. She still thinks nothing of it, and she thinks that if she sleeps and wakes up the next morning, this will no longer be there. But to her surprise, she wakes up the next morning and it's still there, the same tingling sensation, the same numbness. She now gets worried, and she goes to the hospital emergency department to get checked up. Now picture this patient as well, a different case. A 66-year-old carpenter, still working 6 days a week, but on his day off, he goes to sleep, wakes up after an hour of sleep, and then just gets a random episode of lightheadedness. He takes no notice of it, but he can't walk for a bit, but he gets up afterwards. Yet his wife insists that they call an ambulance and get him checked out. Now, what do all these cases have in common? Well, they all have subtle hints onto abnormalities that are hard to pick up, but important to identify and important to tackle. So hello and welcome to Medicinals. And today we will be exploring the wonderful world of the subtlety of medicine and how the trick is in the detail. And I'm Abdullah Dawood, your host. And please do like and subscribe because this video is quite an interesting one. So looking back into the patient where she had the psychiatry patient where she had the anxiety attacks and she was feeling better. The subtle hints were, as I mentioned, she was looking away, feeling distracted. This was quite a confusing subtle hint because after the consultation, I pointed this out to the doctor. He also noticed this. And we had a disagreement on what it could be. Maybe it could have been her anxiety showing through. Or maybe it could have been because her medication could have having an effect on her. Or maybe it's because she is worried about the changes in her treatment or the physical health check that she showed up to. We don't know, but there's subtle hints that need to be explored and possibly tackled. Maybe it is something that we can deal with, or maybe it is not. And into the patient who woke up one day with numbness and a tingling sensation in her hand. This was quite an atypical presentation of a stroke. The only thing that really differentiated it from a TIA is that it lasted for more than 24 hours. But it was really atypical. The only fast sign that she showed was some numbness in her hand. If she paid no further attention to it, it could have become worse. She could have had more serious side effects or consequences, of the stroke, possibly even death. But even she realized that there is something wrong and had to go to the hospital. And for the patient who woke up with some lightheadedness after an hour of sleep, he felt fine. But the quick thinking of the ambulance crew that came to pick him up, they carried out multiple investigations. including an ECG, which showed he needed serious treatment. He had stable angina. Now, what all these cases represent is the fact that you need to think on your toes and need to be proactive in thinking outside the box. Now, what I mean by that is that, for example, the person who showed up with lightheadedness, if you just looked at a face value, just the symptoms he had, and just a quick investigation, you could have easily mistook it for something else, such as dehydration. Maybe he had a headache beforehand, and you would have missed a critical diagnosis of stable angina, which could have had huge consequences on the patient's outcome. So this is where thinking on your toes goes directly with carrying out multiple investigations. You need to think to yourself, I may have a differential diagnosis here, but how can I be certain that this is the case? Or how can I be certain that it's not something else? So think to yourself which investigations I need to carry out. Now, this isn't easy. For example, the patient who showed up with a stroke, the woman with the tingling hands, they diagnosed it through imaging modalities, CT scan of the head. They realized there was a plaque in her left carotid, which they operated on and removed. But it is difficult to think to which examinations and investigations to carry out by yourself in these atypical presentations. And this is where teamwork comes through. Other people's experiences and other people's critical thinking will come to help you to save the patient's life, and also to understand how to carry out this thinking in future cases to help you in the future. So this is where communication comes into play. Teamwork is important, but you got to also know how to communicate to your team these atypical cases, which is very hard. You got to tell them that we have this patient with these symptoms, and I worried it could be this and this, but maybe I can have your guys' input on this. Such as last week's video, how I mentioned how to present a case. This is more vigilant communication. You need to give all the details you have, so the rest of the team know what they're dealing with. And so in the end, you can understand how to tackle this case to the best you can. And the only way to really achieve this is through practice. So in the end, to become a good doctor, it's just experiences that are repeated over and over again, which is a recurring theme in this journey of becoming a healthcare professional. Practice makes perfect. So thank you so much for watching Medicinals. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, please leave a like and a subscribe and a comment. And I'll see you wonderful people in the next chapter.